it's not recognizing actually the importance of these roles. There is no suitable box for external engagement in these non-academic roles that are of national relevance, that can highlight how we shape and we make impact in these roles, what responsibility we carry.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research-adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research-adjacent space is where the real magic happens. This episode, my guest is Anya Roding, someone I met for the first time recording this podcast, but who I wish I had known long before now, and I'll explain why. Anya founded the Prism Network, and although I didn't know it at the time, in my most recent job before I went freelance, I was what Anya calls a Prism. Prism stands for Professional Research Investment and Strategy Managers. These are research enabling roles that often function at a fairly senior level, but, we've heard this old chestnut before, don't get the same professional recognition or opportunities as their academic peers. After being told she was an odd sock within her institution at the University of Exeter, Anya decided to go and find the 400 other odd socks who are now part of the Prism Network. Listen on to hear the story of how and why she did it. Welcome along, Anya. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
Oh, you're welcome. I wonder if we could start our conversation today by asking you to tell us a bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm based at the University of Exeter, and I head up the operations and relations for our metamaterials universe here. So for the Center for Metamaterials Research and Innovation, and also the national network that we launched thanks to an EPSRC grant a couple of years ago for specifically metamaterials.
I'm going to have to jump in straight away and ask you to tell us a bit more about what metamaterials are.
Right, so I'm not a physicist. I'm a bioscientist by trade, and I jumped into the universe of metamaterials about 5 years ago, and they are oh gosh, we're working on the definition. It's been out there, and actually the UK was a champion, a pioneer for metamaterials over the last 3 decades or so. So we're trying to refine the definition of metamaterials, but basically what they are 3D structures that are usually made of metals, plastics, or ceramics, and they have properties that are normally not possible with only their unstructured constituent materials. So basically, their speciality is to generate properties that occur in response to an external input, such as exposure to light or mechanical forces or sound waves, and the properties result from a specifically designed and engineered features. So they're deliberately and systematically placed in a certain structure, so that size and quantity and distribution and that structure are really critical to get properties that you wouldn't find if you only had, like, say, gold in your hand. But if you structure the gold in a certain way, then it can do things that normally it wouldn't do, if that makes sense.
So is it a bit like to give a more common example, but all the structures that you can make from carbon, all these kind of nanotubes and, buckyballs and things like that you can make from carbon?
Quite, yeah.
Yes.
So, pretty much. It's really about structure-function relationship.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Oh, well, that's something new for me to start with. So if you started in biology, what's been your career journey that's led you to where you are now?
Oh gosh, that's quite a wiggly, windy path. So I loved biosciences very much, in particular microbiology, genetics, and biochemistry. Even at the time, for me, I worked with plants and understanding structure-function relationships of light harvesting complexes. That's what I did during my PhD back in Germany. What I realized during my PhD there was that while I love research, opportunities for bioscientists are quite rare to stay in academia because there's so many of us. doing a PhD and trying, to shape a career pathway in academia is a very competitive battlefield. I kind of noticed also that I like breadth and I like new stuff. I'm very much like, I don't know, I'm a very curious person, and just being in one subject area wasn't enough in a way. So yeah, I don't know. I contemplated what am I going to do next, and I realized that probably staying active in academia is maybe not the best endeavor going forward, from career prospects to just my interest as well. So through a friend, I happened to get a job in the one of the German ministries for art and research, so culture and research. And I worked for a short period, a few months, in research funding there. So it's a little bit like an equivalent of what we have here with the research councils in England, or in the UK, for example, EPSRC. So it's a little bit like that. And I worked on the other side. So I experienced firsthand what it was like to handle applications. I could see where people maybe fell a bit short of the expectations of reviewers or the whole funding system. And I thought, actually, I'd like to take that knowledge and bring that back into the university environment and really enable research that is of interest to me, where I'm not actively engaged as such, but just creating the playground for the researchers to build there and, and explore whatever they're onto. So yeah, to cut a long story short, so I went from an active research role into research funding, and then took a year out and went traveling in New Zealand, and did odd bits and bobs here and there, and then ended up in England after that year, where obviously the universities have a much more developed environment that supports roles that are not academic roles, if that makes sense. So I found, in comparison to German universities, just the whole landscape is very different. Like the variety of roles you find in a British university ecosystem, from what traditionally I know from Germany is mostly a technician, the researcher, the PhD students, postdocs, the students, of course, and then the occasional administration. So standard core administration like finance and HR, and the occasional PA. I found that here it's much more variety in the roles that support the research ecosystem. So so in a way, when I applied for my first job in the UK, obviously I didn't get anywhere because I had no experience of the system whatsoever. I wanted to get into research enabling roles, but other than doing research, I didn't have much to offer that was, attractive to the field, or to the university here, anyways. And I got I had a very good conversation when I asked for feedback after one of the rejections I received on my applications. I had very good feedback from a person saying there's nothing wrong with your CV, but we are going through a round of redundancies here. And the university will recruit internal staff mainly because they have experience in the system and applying for these roles. So what I would suggest is that you try the temp bank first. So the temporary staff bank, get your foot in the door, get experience, and then take it from there. And that was the best advice ever. So
It's good to know that works. I've given that advice to people in the past, so it's always good to have examples of when it's worked.
It definitely worked for me. And it was a hugely interesting job. I mean, I started as the Swarm administrator, which Swarm is the workload planning tool the university uses. So basically, my job was to deal with all the complaining academics that their workload on the system isn't right. So that was an interesting start.
Baptism of fire.
Most certainly. But that said, it actually enabled me to get to know very quickly very many of the academics in the faculty here. So I work with, so in particular, physics, engineering, math, and computer sciences. And I think that probably helped me in my future roles because I had these relationships already. They knew me, even though mostly they just complained. But if you're trying to be helpful, it's a good start. Yeah, so that was my very first job in a UK university, and through the temping, took only 2 months, and then I moved on to a project management role in the same department environment. So also for physics, engineering, math, computer sciences. And yeah, it was just going, well, it was quite stressful actually. I was going from one short-term contract to the next. So it was like 1 month, 3 months. I think the most I had was 6 months, and you're basically, powering and trying to do your best, getting to grips with all the new challenges that were thrown my way and the stuff to deliver. And at the same time wondering where am I going to pay the next bills from and looking for the next opportunity. So that was quite stressful. But I learned a lot. I made a lot of connections during that time. And when the job I basically started on 5 years ago came around, put me in a perfect position because I had the experience of the system now. It was a baptism of fire, but a steep learning curve. I gathered so much information about, all sorts of stuff that was going on, projects and relationships, politics. That was really, really helpful. That was a very long-winded answer to your question about my career path. I'm so sorry to interrupt me.
That's absolutely fine. And I think that's one of the things I find most interesting, actually. And I think that the listeners find interesting as well, is that there's this sort of fantasy of, you do this and then you apply for this job and then you get a promotion and then you get a promotion. And the reality is it doesn't work like that at all.
Oh God, no. Yeah, and certainly not promotions. I don't see promotions happening for people in roles like the one I have now.
Yeah.
Like even so, even though we're like almost like postdocs or lecturers, you're developing or co-creating a research environment, you're contributing to the success of the researchers, but there are no metrics to measure that success because we're not on the papers. We're often not on the grant applications. I mean, that's a very new development that we're kind of pushing for being recognized and as capacities that actually contribute actively with an invested interest in the research areas we're supporting or managing, and should be named in a way as the managerial capacities. But that's very new. I mean, let's see where it goes.
And that is something that you've done some quite direct work on.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Sorry, I'm alluding to things I should have probably explained. So So what happened was that 2-3 years back, I did actually wonder about, well, where am I going now? I started at the time as a program manager for Center of Doctoral Training 2 years earlier. Very early on, like in the first few months, the next EPSRC call for CDTs was out. That was in 2018, 2017, 2018. And I was basically drawn into developing that proposal, bring the team together. I ended up being named on that proposal as a co-investigator. I went to interview with the academic, the lead academic, and one of our strongest industry partners. In the end, we weren't successful, but that was just this experience of really being a recognized part of that team, like with the industry partners, with the academics, and me in the managerial capacity. Didn't get anywhere. But after that, as I said earlier, we applied to launch a national network for metamaterials. And again, I was a driving factor of that. Together with the academic PI, we were developing the national consultation meetings with the wider community, see whether there's appetite for it. It was very much me bringing in all the different people into the conversation, exploring, whether the community would want this, whether we could actually lead that. And in the end, it was very positive. And again, we applied. I was named as co-investigator in the managerial capacity, and we were successful. And based on that success, I was hoping to, see that recognized in the university's shaping of my role and recognition of my role, and asked for promotion. But there's not really a pathway for professional services. We've got, what is it called? What's it called? Is it the HERA process?
Yes, yeah, the sort of where you
yeah,
get the job evaluated rather than the person. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And that's I don't think that's adequate in a lot of ways. I have heard of so many horrible experiences and a lot of emotional stress of people who went through that process. It wasn't very well supported. There was almost like a sense that actually it's not wanted.
Yeah.
To so I don't know. It's just obviously a very objective notion, but I had the same experience in a way, and I felt like, well, it's not recognizing actually the importance of these roles. There is no suitable box for external engagement in these non-academic roles that that are of national relevance, that can highlight how we shape and we make impact in these roles, what responsibility we carry. So yeah, it's not an easy path, and I hope that there will be better things in the future to recognize that. But to come back to the beginning, so I had this experience, and I wasn't very happy with that experience. At the time, I was told by one of my senior academics here that, oh yeah, but you're an odd sock in the system. Maybe you need to find other odd socks or other people, that are similar roles, and make a case that this is not an isolated thing, that something structural needs to be done about these roles. And that was just before lockdown happened.
Yeah.
And at the time, to be perfectly fair, I thought, hey, hello, I'm coming to you because I'm overworked and I feel underpaid and undervalued. And what you're saying is that I should do more work in order to find my corner. So really, so I wasn't overly happy with that response, to be fair. But then lockdown happened, and for a couple of weeks, when we struggled with technology and things fell apart a bit, I had time on my hands, and I thought, oh well, let's do what he suggested then, and reach out to the research software engineers. So a point of contact in Bristol, he said, like, maybe you want to talk to them because they went through a similar journey, and that's what I did. So and to be fair, that point of contact, Christopher Woods, he is a brilliant person, incredibly kind, and he has really given me the ability to word or to recognize that what I feel and what my sense of the environment was is actually right. And it's not just in my head, but that these roles do go a little bit under the radar, and that they don't really fit in the academic environment, but also not in the standard traditional professional service environment, because they're sitting kind of at the interlink. So we took it from there. I reached out to a couple of colleagues I know in other institutions and formed what we now call the PRISM network, so the Professional Research Investment and Strategy Manager. Choosing that term deliberately because it didn't seem an adequate role title for these roles that sit at this interface between academics and traditional professional services that enable research in a very direct capacity. But that also link to all the core departments in the university and ensure that the operations, finances, strategic thinking, HR and everything is kind of joined up together with the academic mission. And that network has grown to, gosh, how many are we now? 400 something.
Oh goodness, definitely not odd socks anymore.
No. It's more than 50 institutions, mostly universities, but some other institutions as well in the UK. And yeah, it was amazing to see how much this first description of the role, as vague as it can be, resonated with people who step forward and saying, oh gosh, this is the first time I hear this. This is the first time I recognize my role somewhere and I don't feel so isolated anymore. Sitting in teams in professional service of project managers, but they don't really do what I do. I do project management as a tool, but I'm not a project manager. I'm driving, I'm taking responsibility, I'm shaping the new vision, and that goes beyond project management as a scope. So and then others who very much take the term project manager and run with it, and that's fine, but it doesn't suit every of the PRISM roles as such. So Yeah, it was just amazing to see. And I handed over that network, the leadership of it recently, to Isabella, my colleague in Imperial, who's doing a brilliant job of raising the profile and engaging with EPSRC, UKRI, and universities to drive the vision and the mission forward.
And so what is your vision? What do you hope the future might hold?
Well, we set out initially with two aims. Number one is to bring this community together, to identify the odd socks and give them a home and a place where they feel like I'm not alone, and it doesn't mean that you have to have regular contact. Sometimes it's just knowing that you're not alone, and that is enough. But we did host like experience exchange workshops and stuff to enable them to link up with each other and maybe share, like, is it just me? Is it just my university, or is it everywhere like that? The barriers and problems I hit in my role. What do you do? Share solutions, share grief, whatever comes their way, and find like some strength in that as a community. And I think we've definitely hit that goal over the last couple of years. And the other one is to raise awareness of these roles with funders, with university senior management, in order to create a better employment environment for these roles, because they are often employed post-award, so they're on fixed-term contracts. Very many of the members are women, so over 90% in our membership are or identify as women, as female, and very many have a strong educational background. They come with a PhD, often a STEM subject, but they decided for whatever reason not to stay in an active research role, or they come, with a master's or a bachelor's or from anywhere else, with a lot of experience in community management, in strategy, in research environments, in bringing people together and convene them around a shared ambition, when they're all normally scattering off like, what's it called, the expression, herding cats.
Yeah.
To basically create something that's bigger than the part of its sums. And that is a skill set and some experience that you don't find easily, I think.
Yeah,
and true. It seems like it's very, very attractive to women in particular. And yet, as I said earlier, fixed-term contracts, no career progression, because there is no progression pathway. The only way of progression is to, apply for another job, leave the team you have grown, and go elsewhere. And that might be sometimes appropriate, but often, if a professor can grow in their research environment, why can't the managerial counterpart?
Yes. Yeah.
Without changing subject constantly and starting from scratch constantly. So the vision would be that actually there is a step change in the employment culture for these roles, that there are underwritten roles, mechanisms where these roles are given job security, so they can have families, buy houses, and not be influenced by financial decisions around these very life-changing events, that they are recognized for what they do, for what they contribute to research, in particular to huge research investments. If you think about taxpayers' money, that's been awarded, and you would like a team that hits the ground running from day one, as soon as the grant starts, so you need people in post who already know, who have the relationships, who know the research landscape they're embedded in. Other than that, is always reinventing the wheel, lengthy employment procedures, and redundancy procedures towards the end, people jumping ship before a grant is ending, because of course they need to pay the bills. Where are they going next if you can't provide them security? So what my hope would be, that in the future, is that there is a much better employment culture for these roles, much more job security, progression pathways, recognition, and therefore better utilization of taxpayers' money that goes into research, and better outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Is ultimately that's when you're in these roles, having a lot of what you said there really resonated with my own experience, and you can see that these roles make the research better. So you just think, well, why wouldn't you want to do more of it? It makes the research better. It makes outcomes better. Oh, well, I think you've very nicely touched there on one of the things I always like to ask people about, which is what, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about about the world you work in. And I think that's a nice answer there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's doable. I totally think it's doable, and we've seen it for in some universities for the research software engineers. I mean, they've shaped this path already. The technicians, with Kelly Weir, they are going in the right direction as well. So it's really recognizing all the roles that are relevant to make research happen, and recognizing that not one size fits all either.
Yeah.
It's like trying to do a broad brush approach and they're all project managers. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
Their strategic responsibility can go way beyond project management, just the delivery of something that somebody else developed. They may be co-creator
absolutely.
Of research environments, and it's recognizing that there are different shapes and sizes and colors for these roles, and depending on what the research team needs, they usually adjust to these needs.
Yeah, I love your term co-creating research environments. I think that really nicely sums up these roles, because that's the reason I came to using this term research adjacent, was because all the language around administration and support didn't feel adequate.
No.
So I love this idea of co-creating research environments.
I completely agree. I really struggle with the term support, and support is a great word, right? It's great to be in a supportive environment, but in the universities, it always seems like very one way. It always seems like a very hierarchical. As soon as you use the word support in a university environment, it's like the administrators, the managers, technicians supporting the academic, which in a way is true, but it is supporting the research, it is supporting the innovation, it is supporting, the ideas, and we do that as a team.
Yeah.
And there is recognition for the academics for creating these ideas, but there must also be recognition for the other roles, like technicians, like the managers, who influence these ideas, who sanity check them perhaps, or say what is doable, what can we, not from an academic and research point of view, but from a feasibility point of view, in this environment, can we make this happen? How can we make this happen? And that is as important as we would like to make this happen, if that makes sense. So
it really does. Yeah. No, I've done a lot of sense checking things myself. So
yeah. And I don't want to sound like, oh, the academics have great ideas, but they can't do it. And of course they can do something with that. But it requires, this day and age, I think, more than one person, more than one brain and mind to do that. It requires a lot of different skills and experiences that need to come together to make the most of, an idea.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I'm right there with you, and if we could make some of that happen, I think it would be a fantastic thing. I'm just keeping an eye on time, so we've had such a good conversation there. You've mentioned a couple of the people that you work with, who've done great work in a similar field. Is there anybody else that you would like to mention?
Oh gosh, that's going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
there are so many important people. Oh gosh, if I start naming names or continue naming names, and I will exclude someone. It's like, okay, right. So I would like to mention first and foremost the committee of the PRISM network. There are people like Susie Douglas, for example, in Bath, who was my sanity and a checker from day one, even before starting the network. There are our champions in some of the institutions like Fleur, Hughes in York. There's Rachel Sparks in Newcastle, and Chloe Turner also in Bath, who are doing an excellent job of putting together events, putting together their communities, really daring to step up and contact senior management in their institutions. I mean, it's such a brave thing to do, to put yourself out there and try to be a voice for others. And I definitely want to give a shout out to my academic counterpart, so Alistair Hibbins, professor of metamaterials in Exeter. He has been such a great supporter during the journey. I think without him, and him providing me with opportunities, giving me this experience of working on eye level together, not looking down at my job, or and basically seeing the value in what I add to his work. That was hugely important to the whole journey, and having experienced that and thinking, if he can do that, why can that not be a culture that is embedded more widely?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do apologize already to all the people I didn't mention.
It's impossible to
there are so many. Like, if you think about the advisory board of the PRISM network as well, like Sarah Sharples, the CSA for the Department of Transport, sits on our advisory board, huge champion for the roles. Dave Knowles, CEO of the Royce Institute. It's great to have these people on board. Helen Turner, director of Midlands Innovation. So it's just if I want to give shout outs to people, just look at the PRISM website.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good shorthand. Yeah, we'll definitely get the link to that. We'll put it in the show notes, so people can find out more about the network. And if people want to connect with you directly, what's the best way to find you?
Well, the best way to find me is via LinkedIn, I suppose. Just type Anja Roding, so my name in LinkedIn. Metamaterials, any such keywords. The issue, though, is that I will leave the UK. So I'm due to leave the UK in 7 weeks. So I will leave this higher education sector, and I will leave the PRISM network behind. And I do hope that things will move on to good or better things for my colleagues and those who come after us. So but LinkedIn is always a good. I might be slow to respond, but I will eventually.
Great. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can find you there. And so it just remains to say, well, good luck with your next adventure, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Thanks very much for giving the opportunity and giving a platform for these roles. It's really great.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links under the episode to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the Research Adjacent Roundup newsletter. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.